I want to start off today's show with something a little bit different. I want to rank the Gears of War titles up to this point in time because I think what we have to do obviously as a community, we have to look to the past as well as the current present to really look forward to the future. So I want to go ahead, guys, and give you all my personal favorite Gears of War titles, or I should say, ranking all the Gears of War titles from worst to best. Let's kind of do that because that's something I've been really interested to do with all of you guys. So let's get into it. First and foremost, guys, the release timeline of Gears of War. So Gears of War, obviously, guys, goes back a number of years. It was my very first title I ever got on the Xbox 360. When I purchased my Xbox 360, I worked a whole summer to get that Xbox 360, and Gears of War was the title that came with it. Now, guys, 2006 is when the original Gears of War title came out. 2008, Gears of War 2. 2011, Gears of War 3. 2013, Judgment. 2015, Gears of War Ultimate Edition. 2016, Gears of War 4. And then we got Gears Pop, Gears 5, as well as Gears Tactics between 2019 and 2020. And obviously now, where we sit here in 2022, we're looking forward to what the future of the franchise might look like. So, in terms of going from worst to best, now, what I'm going to do, guys, I'm not going to rank Gears Pop or Gears Tactics, just because I think they're both different in their own ways, right? They're different from the main streamlined Gears of War titles. Gears Tactics, I liked it for what it was, and same with Gears Pop. I think I liked both of them for what it was. I think I personally would have rather had the Coalition work solely on Gears 5, put all their resources into Gears 5 instead of kind of spreading themselves between a few different titles like Gears Tactics and Gears Pop. And sure, they had other development teams helping them on those other titles, but I just would have preferred to have the Coalition solely focused on Gears 5. I think that would have really helped. Even though I enjoyed Gears 5, I think that it suffered in certain ways because they were trying to spread themselves too thin on having people, kind of supporting Gears 5, supporting Gears Tactics, as well as Gears Pop. That being said, let's talk about ranking the Gears of War titles from worst to best. I've said this a number of times, guys, that Gears of War Judgment, in my opinion, was the title that took us into the dark ages of Gears of War. And so Gears Judgment will always be, to me, the worst title in the franchise. Now, is it always going to be that way? I certainly hope it is, because if we get titles worse than that, that means future entries of the Gears of War franchise are not going to be very good. So Gears Judgment, to me, guys, was the worst title in the franchise for a number of reasons. Obviously, I thought that it was kind of Epic Games coming off of the greatest 3 games, as far as a trilogy is concerned, I've ever experienced in gaming, that being Gears 1, 2, 3. And then, of course, coming to Gears Judgment, obviously, the hype was so... They built such a huge anticipation around Gears of War 3, and obviously trying to eclipse Gears of War 3 is probably pretty close to impossible, and that's why when Gears Judgment came out, it was such a huge letdown to a lot of people in the community. Now, if you like Gears of War Judgment, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, video games are all subjective. What I really like and I find interesting, you may not find interesting, and vice versa. That's what's awesome about being human, right? So Gears of War Judgment, to me, was the worst Gears of War title ever made. I felt that it was a title in which felt like it was just like a round of horde mode, where essentially every single, every level of the campaign felt very much so just like you were playing waves and waves of enemies, kind of like in a match of horde mode. And I just did not like that at all. It didn't feel like a campaign. It felt like I was playing horde mode throughout a lot of Gears Judgment. Not that the story was bad, or the characters were bad, because it was fine. I didn't really like the moving away from Marcus Phoenix as the main character and playing as Baird. I understand that they were trying to, kind of set a different tone and things of that nature. They even changed up some of the mechanics of the game, like with switching your weapon, things of that nature, which were interesting concepts. I just didn't think it landed very well. Coming in for me, guys, at number 2, as far as if we're going from worst to best, number 2 has been one that's been really tough for me, but I would have to put Gears of War Ultimate Edition. And not that I didn't like Ultimate Edition. I love Gears of War as a whole, guys. I absolutely love, this franchise. But Gears of War's Ultimate Edition, even though, they remastered Gears of War 1, I just felt that, at least in my mind, I thought it was a step backwards from the original game. The graphics were good, but they kind of changed some things, for the worse. I thought that Marcus Phoenix, in particular, he looked a lot better in the original Gears of War than he did in Ultimate Edition. And they did add some things to Ultimate Edition that made it, interesting. But I felt like they changed some things. And obviously, playing the original Gears of War title, it's hard for me to say that a remaster is going to be able to eclipse that original experience I had with Gears of War 1. And that's kind of like, we talk about the Gears of War collection, them remastering Gears of War 2 and Gears of War 3. I don't think it's going to capture that magic for me like when I played them originally. Sure, it'd be great to go back and play them in a remastered way, but something about it, it's not necessarily the same, right? So that being said, Gears of War's Ultimate Edition would be that number 2 for me. Now, obviously, guys, this is, where it starts to get kind of interesting, at least for me. I would have to say that we're going to get a little bit controversial here in a minute, because the next one that's coming up here, if we're going from worst to best, at least in my personal opinion, right, I'm going to have to say, after Gears of War's Ultimate Edition, I'm going to bring up Gears of War. Now, Gears of War, guys, when I first started playing this game, absolutely fell in love with this franchise as a whole. I thought that Gears of War 1 was very special to me in a number of ways, but obviously Gears of War 1, it lacked a number of things where that innovation kind of evolved over time. And so the first Gears was great from a campaign perspective. Obviously multiplayer and those things, they were still trying to kind of figure it out, but it was still awesome being able to play, different modes and things of that nature. But I just felt that over time it got better and better and better, right? So I would say that after Ultimate Edition, Gears of War would be next in my opinion, if we're kind of going up that ladder, which might be controversial. Some of you may have something else in that spot, but for me at least, it was Gears of War. Then from there, we get to Gears 5. Now, I liked Gears 5 a lot, a lot more than most people would like Gears 5. I thought that it was great from the perspective of having, I would say, something that was really awesome to me about Gears 5 was this semi-open world feel. I thought that was awesome. I thought, they continued to add new modes and things of that nature, like Hive Busters, the, escape mode as a whole. They had some really cool elements to Gears 5, and I thought that it was a great entry in the franchise. But when we look at the overall trajectory, it's definitely not at the top 3 for me. It's definitely something that I enjoyed more than Gears of War Ultimate Edition. I enjoyed it more than Judgment, and I enjoyed it more than the first Gears of War, but I can't put it in that upper echelon of the Gears of War titles. Just because I, number one, didn't like that the Coalition went in the direction of moving us from JD to Kate Diaz so quickly from a campaign perspective. I love Kate Diaz. I think she's an awesome character, but I just felt like we were only JD for one game, and I just thought it was such a disservice to him as a character. I didn't like the direction they took JD Phoenix in Gears 5. So there was that. And then, of course, them shutting down now it's just kind of, obviously, all the Gears of War titles have had shaky launches and things of that nature, but I felt like it was a step down from Gears of War 4's multiplayer experience, as well as the esports experience as well. So Gears 5 is going to be in that next that next spot above Gears of War. Then we're going to get to the next game, and we're getting, of course, to the top 3 Gears of War titles in my personal opinion. At number 3 is Gears of War 4. So Gears of War 4, guys, I thought was a fantastic title. Overall, I thought it was a great step in the positive direction for Gears of War as a franchise. I would say that Gears of War 4 was the true successor to the original Gears of War trilogy that came out, and I loved it for what it was. I thought that it was a fantastic experience. I loved the direction that the Coalition went with having JD Phoenix as the main character that we were playing as. I thought that Ultimate Edition was, a great first step for the Coalition, and then Gears of War 4 being their first main entry into this franchise. Gears of War 4 was something very special, at least to me. I know a lot of people have, obviously there's a lot of different opinions of Gears of War 4, but I thought Gears of War 4 was fantastic from an esports perspective. I thought it was probably the best title, in my opinion, for Gears of War esports. When it came out, I just thought there was the best plan of action for Gears esports. I thought that the campaign was great. Multiplayer, I absolutely loved. I just loved everything about Gears of War 4 overall. There were certainly a few things, guys, that I thought weren't, could have been better, but I just thought overall that the Gears of War, Gears of War 4 was a fantastic entry into the Gears of War universe. And so that is at number 3. Coming in at number 2, and this is always really tough for a lot of people in the Gears of War community, but for me at number 2 was Gears of War 2. And here's why. I thought that Gears of War 2, so Gears of War 1 kind of set the stage, right? And then you add Gears of War 2 comes out to so much anticipation. It comes out, it exceeds expectation in a massive, massive way. Loved the game, loved the campaign. I thought that they had, added some things from Gears of War 1 and just really eclipsed a number of those things in Gears of War 2. A lot of gut-wrenching moments, a lot of exciting moments. It was such a great entry. And there's a lot of people who would argue that Gears of War 2 is the best Gears of War title ever made. To me, though, it's at number 2. Like I said, I thought it's fantastic. I'm very, very, excited for the possibility of a Gears of War collection with Gears of War 2 being remastered. I think that would be really awesome, but an absolutely incredible experience. And coming in, guys, obviously, last but not least, coming in at number 1 for me was none other than Gears of War 3. Gears of War 3, the brothers to the end, all the different mottos, narratives going on with Gears of War 3 was something unlike anything I've ever experienced in gaming. And still to this day, have not experienced. Just an unbelievable experience for me. When you think of the hype that was built from Gears of War 1 to Gears of War 2, and Gears of War 3 having to, try to match or eclipse the anticipation and hype of Gears of War 2, and I thought that they landed on every area when it came to that with Gears of War 3. Obviously Horde mode, obviously Beast mode, from the campaign, it really showed just that trajectory. I thought it was perfect. I thought it was the perfect Gears of War title, and we have not been able to kind of get back to that point, yet. I mean, the closest thing to me would be Gears of War 4, but Gears of War 3 was so special in a multitude of different ways, and I, definitely put it as, my favorite game of all time. Not just the best in the Gears of War franchise, but my favorite game of all time. And look, guys, obviously being a huge Gears of War fan, most of these games are in my favorite games of all time, right? I mean, whether we're talking Gears of War 3, Gears 5, I mean, I just love the Gears of War universe as a whole. I absolutely love this universe. And so that's why I put it as, my favorite game of all time. Certainly, I love Call of Duty. I love, StarCraft. I love a number of different titles out there. We made tons of content on the YouTube channel revolving a number of games, but I would definitely say that Gears of War 3 was number one on my list for the greatest Gears of War title ever made. So now let's go, obviously we went from worst to best. So let's go over this one more time. So at number one for me, guys, Gears of War 3 for sure. Number two, Gears of War 2. Love Gears of War 2. At number three was none other than Gears of War 4. And then at number 4 was, to me at least, was Gears 5. At 5 was Gears of War, and then of course 6 being Gears of War Ultimate Edition, and last but not least Gears of War Judgment at 7. Obviously we didn't put Gears Pop and Gears Tactics in there, as I had alluded to earlier, but those are my favorite, best to worst, worst to best Gears of War titles ever made up to this point. It'll be interesting to see what the trajectory is moving forward now that the Coalition is taking more and more time to work on the next iteration of Gears of War. But what's your list, guys? What's your best to worst ranking, or worst to best ranking, however you want to put it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And for more Gears of War content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.